Picture your ancestors lying down for the night. No walls, no door, just bare ground, a small firelight, and open darkness stretching out in every direction, full of animals that could kill a person without much effort, creatures that can smell a human from a mile away, creatures that can hear a heartbeat change, creatures that see perfectly in conditions where a sleeping human is almost completely blind, and yet, morning after morning, across tens of thousands of years, your ancestors woke up. Why? A sleeping human is, on paper, the easiest possible target, unable to fight, unable to run, barely able to register a threat until it has already arrived. You would expect predators to treat a campsite like an open buffet. They almost never do. And the reason is not one single thing, it is several overlapping systems without you ever having to be conscious for any of them. To start with something that sounds almost unbelievable, to most large predators, you are not prey, you are the thing to avoid. In 2019, researchers at the University of California, Santa Cruz ran an experiment on mountain lions in the wild. They played recordings of ordinary human voices near the animals, nothing aggressive, just people talking, and measured the response. The mountain lions fled, not occasionally, consistently, and at rates comparable to how they responded to the sound of dogs barking. In some cases, they fled faster. These are animals capable of taking down a full-grown deer without much difficulty, and they ran from a conversation. More strikingly, some of these mountain lions abandoned kills they had already made, simply because a human voice had entered the area. In pure survival terms, that is an enormous cost. The discomfort of a nearby human outweighed the value of the meal. This is not unique to mountain lions. Biologist Craig Packer, who has spent decades studying lions in the Serengeti, has documented how selectively lions weigh risk before engaging with anything, including humans. Wolves near human settlements, tigers giving villagers a wide margin even inside otherwise ideal territory. The pattern repeats across continents and across species that have almost nothing else in common. Here is where the story becomes darker and more interesting. This caution is not something predators figure out individually, it is something they inherited. Humans have hunted large predators aggressively for roughly 2 million years. Entire species vanished not long after humans arrived in their territory. The predators alive today are, almost without exception, descended from the individuals who were careful around humans. The bold ones did not survive to reproduce. The cautious ones did. Passed down across thousands of generations, this caution eventually stopped being a lesson and became instinct. It is now simply the baseline behavior of large predators sharing space with humans. When an animal picks up a human scent in the dark, something ancient in its nervous system fires a warning that was never consciously learned. Fire adds another layer to this. Anthropologist Richard Wrangham has argued that the controlled use of fire may be one of the most significant turning points in human history, and its effect on predators is part of that story. Fear of fire is close to universal across land animals, and it does not need to be learned through experience. It is built in deeply enough that animals raised in captivity, with no history of wildfire, still show avoidance behavior at the smell of smoke. A campfire does not need to hurt a predator to keep it away. It only needs to disrupt the visual advantage predators depend on, and broadcast a signal into the dark that something unusual, something that controls fire, is present. Long before writing, before farming, before permanent shelter, your ancestors had already found the one variable predators could not adapt around quickly. But even with fire and inherited caution accounted for, there is a piece of this that has nothing to do with fear at all. It has to do with math. Large predators are not reckless. That image, the fearless apex hunter attacking anything within range, is closer to fiction than fact. A predator with a serious injury does not get treated. A broken leg or a damaged eye in the wild often means a slow decline towards starvation. Every potential attack is, in effect, a calculation. Is this worth the risk? A sleeping human fails that calculation in multiple ways. Predators are most confident, attacking prey they know intimately, prey whose panic patterns and blind spots they have studied across thousands of encounters. Humans do not fit that template, unpredictable and unfamiliar. There is almost always an easier option nearby. available without the uncertainty a human represents. Here is something that rarely comes up, and it might be the strangest piece of all. Your sleep is not as defenseless as it feels. Human sleep moves through cycles, dropping into deep, slow-wave stages before rising back into lighter stages where the brain remains far more responsive to the environment than most people assume. Researchers studying this describe it as a kind of sentinel function, a partial watch maintained even during rest. Unfamiliar sounds are more likely to break through into waking awareness than familiar ones. A twig snapping, a shift in air pressure, something moving where nothing should be moving. This is not accidental. Humans who slept too deeply across evolutionary history were less likely to wake in time. The lighter sleepers, the ones who could go from unconscious to alert within seconds, were the ones who survived long enough to pass that trait forward. Your sleep was shaped by threat as much as by rest. And then there is the fact that you were rarely ever alone. Groups matter enormously to predators because predators understand group dynamics through their prey. An animal at the edge of a herd is vulnerable. An animal in the center is protected. Humans sleeping in a cluster function the same way. If one person stirs or wakes and makes noise, the rest of the group is likely to follow. That possibility, a clean, quiet, low-risk kill turning into a chaotic group response, is exactly the kind of uncertainty predators are built to avoid. None of this means a sleeping human is untouchable. It is worth being honest about that. The attacks that do happen follow a strikingly consistent pattern. They almost always involve something that has broken the normal rules. An injured predator that can no longer hunt its usual prey. A predator whose habitat has collapsed. An animal that has lost its inherited wariness after repeated contact with humans who fed it or left food unsecured. The lions of Tsavo in 1898, responsible for dozens of deaths among railway workers, were later found to be unusual animals, one with severe dental damage that made normal hunting difficult. The Champawat tiger, blamed for hundreds of deaths across India and Nepal in the early 1900s, was eventually discovered by hunter Jim Corbett to have shattered canine teeth from an old injury, unable to take down the prey it was built for. In nearly every documented case, something had gone wrong first. The normal calculation had already broken down before the exception occurred. There is one more layer to this, and it might be the strangest part of the whole picture. The same instinctual fear that predators feel that keeps you safe at night is now reshaping entire ecosystems. That same 2019 study on mountain lions found that when the animals avoid areas with human activity, deer populations in those zones grow because predation pressure drops. Vegetation gets overgrazed. Smaller predators, coyotes and foxes among them, also shift away from human presence, which allows rodent populations they once controlled to expand. None of this required direct contact with a single one of those animals. Fear inherited across thousands of generations radiates outward through an entire food web, all triggered by nothing more than your presence. So when you lie awake for a moment in an unfamiliar place and feel that faint, old pulse of unease in the dark, that feeling is not a malfunction. It is the same ancient calculation your ancestors relied on for tens of thousands of nights before you, still quietly running in the background, still checking the same old question before letting you rest. Picture your ancestors lying down for the night once more, bare ground beneath them, firelight flickering against the dark. But somewhere out past the edge of that firelight, something that could end them without much effort is running its own calculation too. And after 2 million years of learning the hard way, it already knows the answer. It is not worth the risk.